Today's guest quit a stable and successful job in shipping logistics to follow her true calling, writing about food. She believes food is at the root of everything: history, culture, and our social landscape. In 2013, Anisha co-founded Goya Media and launched a publication that focuses on stories about food: who cooks it, who eats it, and how it is a part of the human connection. In the world of creating content, what makes a good food story? Let's find out from Anisha herself. Welcome. Thank you so much for doing this.
I wouldn't have missed it.
So my first memory of actually the Goya Journal was, I think it was 2016 or maybe 2015 when I reached out to you guys to do like a food writing workshop at Studio
I remember
15.
That was one of our first. It was such a great experience. In fact, we made some really incredible friends that have stayed with us since then. And that was our first year. So that was really exciting. Thank you for that.
So been a fan ever since.
Thanks, Pooja.
So what I wanted to understand is that you started your career in a field completely different from journalism, shipping and logistics. How easy or difficult was it for you to make the decision to leave like a lucrative financial industry to follow your passion for food journalism?
So, actually, weirdly enough, in school, those aptitude tests they make you do, right? I did one in the 10th. And it said, oh, you are most suited to being a journalist. And I was like heading the school newspaper and all of that. So I was like, yeah, this makes sense. And my grandmother was like, no way. Journalists make zero money. You are not doing this. And then I was like, okay, maybe she has a point. And then right after college, I got recruited into this shipping and logistics company.
Sounds awfully boring, man.
It was. I was like, what does logistics mean? That was my first question to the recruiter.
What did you have to do?
So it was a management program. And she said, nobody says no to this company because they move you around every 6 months to the different departments of the company. They send you to Copenhagen every 6 months for like 2 weeks of training. And you get to they're obsessive with their tea time cake. So it was incredible, And
so wait, they were...
we would stop class.
How does cakes come into logistics? Please explain. I'm a bit lost.
Vital reason for me staying on at Maersk was that we would go every 6 months to Copenhagen and we would have 2 weeks of classes on subjects like investment in maritime law and things like that. But every day at 3:45, the professors would stop everything and they'd be like,
it's cake time.
Guys, it's 4 p.m. It's almost 4 p.m. Wrap up because we take our tea really seriously. Everyone would stop and they would have the most massive array of cakes. They are obsessive with their danishes and everything. It was incredible. So that was the primary reason I stuck it out for 4 years. And then I thought, I don't think this is where my heart is.
How long did it take you to?
It took me a while. I finished the management training program and then they put me in one of the most exciting teams they had in Bombay. And it was when I said that I think I'm going to go home, everyone looked at me like I was crazy because people who join this company and they treat you really well and they pay you really well. I was paid top of my class when I graduated. So everyone was like, why would you leave this? It makes no sense. I think also having this fancy pay package early on made it easy for me to say, oh, how far can I fall?
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So I said, and a friend of mine told me about this editorial team at Yahoo, and it was headed by this amazing editor, Prem Panikar, and they were doing storytelling online, and they were pushing what storytelling meant online, and they got me to work on their health and fitness and news channels. And I said, yeah, sign me up. And I spent 4 years actually working with them. It was amazing. So everything I learned about storytelling online and journalism, actually, I learned there because Prem was such
There was no background in journalism.
There was
other
nothing.
Than just
No.
the school.
Nothing. I studied economics and psychology in college. So everything that I learned about journalism was at Yahoo with Prem and some really amazing colleagues. That was a decision that paid off. But then 4 years into Yahoo, I met Aisha when we were both sort of working at a print magazine, beautifully produced. I loved it. I'd been working with them as a consultant for a few months, and Aisha came on as a writer. And we said, all the magazines are only talking about food from the restaurant perspective, and there's no one talking about home food in India. And India's real food is actually in the home kitchens. And we saw magazines like Food 52 and Lucky Peach abroad that was sort of celebrating the diversity of the food they have there. And in India, it is so much deeper, so much wider, so much more exciting. And there was nothing really talking about it. So on a whim, we sort of started it.
Okay, so what does Goya mean?
Oh, so Goya is an Urdu word, which means to be transported by great storytelling. And most people think that because we come from Bangalore, it means, eh, Goya. And we're like, close, but that's not it.
How beautiful.
It was Aisha's idea.
Yeah.
It was her sister's idea, and we stole it from her. So, yeah.
And how old were you guys then?
I was 30. Aisha was about 27. And we started on a whim. And we commissioned stories from people. We knew Gresham was one of them. He wrote one of our first stories. And then about a year into it, people started sending us pitches. And it sort of took on momentum of its own. So it became very exciting for us. Then it became this beast that we had to keep feeding because we're like, this is amazing. How do we, how do we stay up the party? That's how we got started.
And I mean, so when you started this, did you have like any idea of what kind of, did you put a business plan together? Did you feel, or like, did you really look at this as something that could support you financially? Or was it just a whim that, okay, I want to do this and I'll figure out where the money part comes later? Like, how did you navigate that part?
Actually, we did. We did think about a business plan and everything because I was working as a freelancer after Yahoo and I had some amount of money coming in. And so we said we have to pay all the writers who are working with us because we didn't want to be those people who said, do it for the exposure. So we said, how are we going to keep this going? And we tried to figure out what the market rates were. And we started a media house that would take on consulting for brands. So because we were good with storytelling, we said, let's extend that to brands who want to tell their story. And we did that right from the first day. In fact, one of our first clients was within the family, Aisha's sister, who ran a chocolate company, one of the most beautiful chocolate brands I've come across
in
today.
Bangalore?
Yeah. And so we did a photo shoot for her and we helped with telling the story of her range at the time. And from there on, we got a few clients and we tried to build that momentum. But we were basically two food writers who knew nothing about business and we were learning everything from scratch. We, of course, had a client who didn't pay us.
I was just going to ask you, what is like one thing that you learned the hard way?
Oh my God. We had a client, of course, one of our first clients who did not pay us. And, at the time we said, but you have to, we have a contract and everything. And he pulled out the contract like 2 months into us working and said, I never signed the contract. And my dad was like, well, you guys walked into that one now, you know better. So, yeah, we've had lots of those stories. But definitely. And I think there's also something exciting to being able to learn this on your own. Because at least for me, we came out of school as high achievers. We never failed. And we had to learn, one, we had to fail, and then we had to learn how to fail, right? And how to pick yourself up and how to recover, how to move on. So all of those things were huge, painful learning experiences.
I feel you, man. So many. I started when I was 23 as well, and same thing, passionate, did it because I just wanted to be creative and I loved and I left all, like, I didn't want to do any of the other things and it was hard. It feels like I put myself through business school.
Yeah.
That I funded myself.
Yeah.
Through like,
I know. Yeah. And there's nothing like that. It's like putting yourself through the test of fire at the end of it, right? Yeah, I feel like we're still there though. Where are you on your journey?
I think we're going to require another podcast for that. It's going to take a while. But so this is now, it's been 7 years, 8 years?
Yeah, we just finished 7. We're on our
yeah. And so starting an online publication isn't always easy. And now, especially now with so many people creating content and for, it's like free access around food and reviewing restaurants. So what makes Goya unique?
I think from the beginning for us, our vision has been very clear in that we want to document the depth of India's cuisine, the depth of our culinary repertoire, and to celebrate it. And when I say celebrate it, I mean the people behind it. Very often and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way at all, because I think we have an amazing, vibrant restaurant scene. But the people in the restaurants are mostly men. But the people feeding the country at home are women. And there seems to be like a huge gap in that narrative, like our first experience of culture and identity is at home. Why is that storyteller not translating to the commercial front? So that's something that means very much to us, and that's what drives us. And I feel like those are the two things that really distinguish what we do at Goya. And also that we're not one person telling the story. We have a network of hundreds of writers and photographers and artists around the country that write for Goya. And I feel like that collaborative network really...
How difficult is it to stick to a vision? Because when you start something, it's really simple. It's very like, it's almost as a, you have like really high expectations, and you set these goals, and you're like, okay, this is what my vision is going to be.
Yeah.
And then through the years, 7-8 years, maybe different opportunities come up. I'm sure there have been parts where you've been tempted to say, okay, what makes you actually then stick to that vision that you started with? Or do you think you've stuck to it?
I think so. I actually think a lot of that goes to having a partner, to someone who sort of like helps you course correct. And very often I want to run faster, and Aisha will be, wait, let's slow down and think about that. And many times I get annoyed because I'm like, oh, why do we have to slow down? We're just getting some momentum. But sometimes slowing down forces me to think. It gives me, and I'm just like ruminating at the back of my head, even when you're not consciously aware of it. And that helps you sort of keep the focus. And I hope that stays. I hope we're able to maintain the focus, and if anything, go deeper, on that. Yeah.
So at Goya, you say that you're obsessed with storytelling, and there are many stories around food. What makes a food story a good one? And how do you find that good, juicy narrative? What do you go for?
I think one is, can you tell me a story that I think I know and then totally blow my mind and change the perspective on it? For example, we did one story on the vindaloo. Now, everybody knows the vindaloo as a Goan dish, a dish with Portuguese origins. But one of our writers wrote us a piece, and she talked about how the vindaloo is the story of India's resistance against colonial rule. And she talked about it from the Portuguese colonial times, which predates Britain. And she talks about how Indian cooks, so while we were ruled by foreign powers, the kitchens were still run by native cooks. And they wanted to replicate dishes that they had at home. But Indian cooks didn't know what that tasted like, and they didn't have ingredients that they could replicate. So they used Indian spices that they knew and they loved. They used Indian vinegar from coconut sap. And in that way, they exerted power over that conversation of identity and culture in the space in the space that they could control, which was the kitchen. And in that way, the dish became a representation of their negotiation with colonial power. And I was like, that is a story I want to hear. Yeah, that gave me goosebumps. Yeah. And then stories that I always love are stories that challenge the way that we think. There's one story of a dish called Tilowan, which was made by the Sikhs of pre-partitioned India. And it was a deeply beloved dish for them. But after partition, the community had to migrate to India. And when you migrate, you pretty much leave everything, right? Yeah. And one of the many things that are lost is also your ingredients, your recipes. Who's written this stuff down?
Wow.
So when they came here, they lost it. But you know what the amazing thing about the story is that the Muslim community of that village continued making Tilowan. So they safeguarded the culinary heritage of their brothers in a way.
Wow.
So whenever the Sikhs from India want to go back and sort of they go back to their hometown in Sukho in Pakistan, they still have a chance to taste that because the Muslim community there still makes this recipe. So those kind of stories, they challenge our ideas of what does it mean to be Indian? Do India and Pakistan hate each other? All these difficult questions that people grapple with and that we think we know the answers to when we watch a cricket match. Everything is challenged. So those stories, they are the ones that knock my socks off. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, those are good stories.
You've also taken Goya offline, where you've designed food experiences and curated menus, we did something for my book, Coming Home, which was really a beautiful experience. So what parallels do you create with your online work and your offline work?
In a way, we like to think of our offline work as just an extension of what we do. Because we're digital, we don't get to meet the community, and we don't get to that IRL experience is absent, right? And there's so much pressure from the community to say, when are we meeting? Because people want to meet other people that share the same interests. And especially after COVID, I felt that desire is so strong. And honestly, we first started it back in 2016 when we started. We would just do informal like cookbook club dinners. We do it at Cubbon Park and at Lal Bagh and at the Nicobar store where they would host us. And And what we found was that there was so much engagement. People were so enthusiastic and committed, Pooja. We would pick a book and everybody would say, okay, I'm cooking this dish. And they would cook it at home after a long day at work, come from Whitefield to the center of town through like 2.5 hours of traffic.
Wow.
And then we'd have a potluck together. So when we saw that, we felt like we had to give back to the community on ground and not just keep it in real life.
How does this community building is a thing that I find super interesting, right? Like even at Low 15, we started this community called the Taste Club.
Yeah, I know that.
Which started in COVID because there was just me and another person making the recipes, and we're like, we don't have enough opinions of people telling us whether this is good or bad.
Yeah.
And after you've tasted the same variation of the same cookie like 100 times, you lose all perspective on what it tastes like. Yeah. So, I just went online and I said, I'll ship this cookie out to 100 people. You just have to fill out this form and tell me what you think about it. It wasn't like this pre-planned, very intelligent way of doing something. It was just like, I needed help.
Yeah.
I reached out to people online and then it just became, today we're like more than 20,000 people in that community.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, every time we do giveaways and we're like, okay, we want to send first 100 people. We did first 500 people.
Yeah.
It takes us like 5 to 7 minutes to get the first 500 people send us their details, like their names and all of that.
5 to 7 minutes?
5 to 7 minutes. And then, just like your email just goes like ping, 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 ping.
Oh
ping.
my God.
And I'm like, that's amazing.
I can't imagine what that feels like. That is so exciting.
It is. And then I always feel like I don't do enough with it because I don't have enough time to deal. And I'm like, how do I make this? And one of the things that I was thinking was also like to do a, offline event and get all these people together.
Yeah.
And when I did one at our kitchen a couple of weeks ago, it was amazing to see these people because they all have similar interests.
Yeah.
To come together, and then there are these bonds forming and people becoming friends.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You're like, oh, you're helping facilitate that. That's amazing.
You just have to like put this platform together and get out of the way because the magic is happening without you. You've already done the groundwork.
How did you start building this community? Like, how do people discover you? How did people discover you? Was that challenging in the beginning?
I don't think we did it consciously. I think we started on Facebook and then we were on Instagram and we had our newsletter. And I think a lot of our most deeply engaged community is from the newsletter. And so they would email us saying, when are you coming to my city? When are you doing this? And so then eventually when we were doing something, we'd let them know. And the response was overwhelming. And also Goya is in many ways a baby company. We're still figuring out things like revenue model and how do we, we pay everybody, but how do we pay ourselves?
Yeah.
So when you're working on things like love and hugs, basically, meeting the people who want to give you that and hearing it firsthand from them about how the work that you do on the internet impacts them in their real lives is huge, right? That's the thing that you can go to bed with until you maybe can pay yourself enough money to pay the rent. But it's something. And in the beginning, it was the only thing that kept us going.
How do you motivate yourself in a situation where you're clearly not doing this for the financial return?
Yeah.
And that's something that I also want to get into.
Yeah.
Is there like, do you sometimes feel like it would just be lucrative to go do something else? Like there are times when you're like, I'm putting in so much effort in this.
For sure.
Do you feel those things?
I feel like it. I feel like COVID was really hard, but it's also when we had the craziest amount of readership. And I said, okay, so there is this audience. How do we translate it? And we don't have what they call the business mind, right? And even if we did think of some things, many doors were closed because people didn't take us seriously as we were referred to as girls, and nobody would even have that conversation with us. So we felt like we were just hitting a wall, and it was hugely demotivating. And then I think a couple of years ago, we decided, whatever project that comes, we'll put 50% into the company and 50% we will split between us. So even if we're paying ourselves like 7 times a year, we're taking something home. And at the end of the day, I mean, even if I wanted to spend it on completely useless shit, I didn't want to say I'm paying for my son's athletics class this month. I said I want to spend it on rubbish like a rug for the house or something that's just, that makes me feel good. And that is motivating. Yeah. So definitely I feel like you can't avoid the money.
No, because I feel like the mistake that, I often tell people this, that the mistake that I made when I started Low 15 was for the first few years, I never factored in a personal salary. It was always about like putting money back into the company and then whatever you get, you put it back, you buy a new, and it always needs money. Like there's always a new machine to buy or something that needs fixing or, something that's happening. And I realized 7 years into it, I was like,
okay, this is great that I built this, but what have I done for myself?
Yeah.
And I think that very often, like, we forget that.
You have to prioritize yourself because you are the engine that's keeping it running.
Yeah. And it's good to feel safe and protected and that you have something.
Yeah.
And
you need to fuel yourself, right? Yeah. I mean, it's amazing you say that as a mistake because we didn't even think about it like that. And I mean,
no, because I changed that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said that I have to get a salary and it has to be a priority. And, if I am like an employee in the company, then I have to like get all the benefits as well. And I think that changed many things for me.
Oh, what did it change?
Like in just the way that, I think the discipline and the discipline of how you manage your cash flow and the way you kind of look at the business completely changed everything. And also it brings a kind of seriousness to what you're doing rather than, I'm just doing this. And because for a lot of people, especially creative people, and for me, it was more like, I don't want to talk about the money stuff because then that gets that puts my creative, then it feels like I'm not doing this for the right reasons. And I was like, no.
How did you manage that switch though, as from a creative person to a business mind? How do you balance that?
I'm interviewing you.
This is a good chance for me to ask some questions.
Let me get my journalist hat back on. And
can't. It's reflex.
No, actually, the real quick answer is that someone cheated me out for a lot of money, which was very hurtful. And obviously, I lost a lot of money. And then I was like, I'm never going to be taken for a fool again.
Okay.
And then I just did what I had to do. I went to finance classes.
Wow.
I started taking coaching from an ex-CA. I kind of really like dug deep. I said, even if it's like the boring stuff or stuff that I don't understand, I would keep asking questions. I would say, okay, how does this? I mean, I opened myself to feedback from from everybody, from not only from all our stakeholders, and I said, if I have to remove this ego completely and really just strip myself down and say, what do I want the business to be and what do I need to learn to get there?
Wow, those are hard questions.
It's hard. And it's hard someone telling you that, you suck at this. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to look at it as an opportunity to learn rather than be like,
wow, good for you. That's amazing.
Yeah. Back to asking you questions.
I have so many follow-ups, but I'm going to hold back.
But so then, I mean, how do you work towards then building a profitable business? Like if these are some of the challenges that you face and you have like sort of, is that something that is part of the bigger picture? Is it a profitable business? Are you working towards building it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a business coach, so to speak, and when he would ask Aisha and me in our first year, we would say, we want to be India's most definitive food media company. That hasn't changed. And we want to absolutely be profitable because I think if you're not profitable, then there are a lot of mistakes that you're making that will hold you back. And I mean, I think what's helping us right now is that we're a very nimble and very, very lean organization, but also we work with a huge network of freelancers, which has sort of been the nature of our business. So when we have commercial projects that we have to take on outside of the journalism part, we just tap into that network, and we already know we've got a great network of quality writers and artists and photographers and musicians that we can tap into, and they come together on projects and we work like that. So in a way, being digital first has helped us be very lean and nimble in that way.
And you started also right before this whole wave of digital started. So I think you got a head start.
Yeah, working at Yahoo sort of taught us how to do that and how to also work with freelancers. Because now I think to do anything big and amazing, you have to work collaboratively. Because the idea of people working, even if they work with you, people are always going to have side hustles, and you have to allow that because that's how people express themselves creatively. And so collaboration is the way forward. I really think that we can do huge things together that we can't do alone.
And we've discussed this once or twice where we've had conversations about bringing investors into funding. What are some of the things you find difficult to explain about your work or plans for the company?
I recently heard this term 0 to 1, which
it's a book. It's a great book.
Yeah, I heard. So we did a talk at TEDx Bangalore, and someone said, "Oh, so you guys did 0 to 1?" And I said, "We did what?" So then I had to look it up, and my husband, who works at Netflix, told me that they also talk about something called the pioneer tax, which means that things are harder for the person who comes first in a particular space. And for everybody else, it will be easier. But
because then you just find a direct comparative and people are like, oh, I want to build I met somebody who was like, I want to build the Netflix of wellness.
Oh.
So I'm like, okay. Or I want to build the Amazon of something, so.
Yeah. And there's already a path, there's an established model that you can sort of replicate. But for us, and also doing storytelling online about food, all of these factors were so amorphous. My parents couldn't understand what we did for the longest time, so let alone explain it to someone else. And they wanted to see what does your P&L look like, and how are you going to monetize this, and what value does it bring. And I know what value it brings, but to articulate it in numbers, that is a whole other language. And I'm not saying that doesn't have value, but I'm saying not being able to articulate it is just a barrier. It doesn't mean that there's no expression for it in numbers.
Actually, when you say what you find difficult to explain to people about the business, but I also think that the value really is the community.
Yeah.
And, that's what people really struggle to build, and really to get people that are who truly care about the work that you do. And I think that once you understand what you have, then how to leverage that community and then build different revenue streams within that.
And now looking back, I can see it much clearer. Like they say, you can connect the dots when you look back. Yeah. And now when I look back, I can say, oh, what we did the last 7 years was that we focused on building a brand, and we went deep. We didn't go wide, which is why we might not have a huge audience, but the audience we have is so invested, so engaged, so committed. And that's what we were doing. Now I can articulate it, and then I can say we did this for 7 years. Now we're going to look at how do we pivot our business model to try different things. So for the last couple of years, what we've been doing is just saying yes to different projects. And we've done one of the country's maybe first crowdfunded cookbook, and we published from 40 communities around the country. And that was such an exciting project. And we said, yes, let's do that. Let's say yes to whatever comes our way. Let's work with projects that require taking a chef from a lesser known community, and let's try to say, what do we do with that? How do we take them to a bigger audience? How do we tell the story in a way that is true to them and also takes into account what the community wants? So we've been experimenting with different formats, and I feel like a lot of it has been very rewarding. Currently, our mindset for the next
Goya
couple of years.
docuseries. That needs to happen. Seriously.
Oh God, yeah.
No?
I mean, I keep saying I should write this down. These are such amazing moments, but sometimes the day is so hectic. You just, where are these stories? They better be up here. Yeah. But we have amazing experiences every day. So
tell me, in the world of Instagram Reels and listicles and short-term gratification.
Oh my God.
What are some of the things you despise about food content today?
I hate how everyone, especially Instagram, has made it seem like your food has to look a certain way before you can eat it or present it to your guests. But no, food should be at the very least or very most, I don't know, it should be tasty. That's it. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be tasty. It can just be nutritious. You just put it in your mouth and get on with your day. You don't have to, your food doesn't have to be this. And there isn't just one way to do it. Because sometimes you hear these Instagram bros saying, oh my God, you ought to do this with your greens and then that with your greens and then this. And if you don't do it this way, you're doing it wrong. And I feel like they're ruining, or they're going to confuse a whole generation of what food means. Or how food is to be experienced. That's not. Sometimes it's okay to drink your breakfast out of the mixie in the morning. It's fine. You should do it. And then sometimes you can make a beautiful meal and sit down with your partner and light a candle, and you should do both. But there's no rules about it. Like there's so much pressure to eat a certain way and be seen a certain way.
And you see that happening. You see that happening a lot.
I see that. Yeah.
And what are some of the trends that you hate? Absolutely.
I hate restaurants that are like 5 floors and you have to walk from, it takes you 10 minutes to get from where you're sitting to the kitchen. What I really dig are those little 5-seater restaurants. That's my jam. And I let me tell you what I love. I love great service. I love great cocktails. I don't care if the food looks beautiful. Just give me something that tastes amazing, that's going to blow my socks off. I don't necessarily want to know where you sourced or which country my salmon came from. We go to restaurants to be taken care of. And that's what I love. Yeah, I really don't want to have to whip my Dalgona coffee till it's pouring out of my cup before I can drink it. Yeah.
And so, being an observer of the food and restaurant industry in India, so what are some of the growing trends you've noticed, just the way food has changed from when you started to today. What do you think is changing and what do you think needs changing?
One thing that I'm so happy has changed is that people think of food so much more seriously, you know. I hate to compare it to the West, but one of the things that has trickled down from the West that's been good for us is that people see knowing about your cuisine and your culture and being able to talk about it in an informed way as huge social currency. And so that has given a huge amount of legitimacy and validated the industry. And because before, if you said you were a food writer, they were like, you are what? You know, everyone in the family would look at us a little bit strange. And it's like, that is such a floofy job for real. But now that's changed. People understand that food is an amorphous and intangible part of our cultural heritage. It should be valued. It should be cherished. And I think that's amazing. What I think is not amazing is that a lot of people who know nothing about it still feel very opinionated.
Because I mean, it's food, right? Like
everyone has an opinion.
And everyone, like, something that I dislike is this authenticity, debate that people keep having. And it's like, it's always like something that I cook in my house is going to be very different from what you cook in your house.
And authenticity is like, there is nothing authentic. And we should be okay with that. Because that's also what's beautiful about food, that we can make it our own, right? But I was specifically referring to things like patriarchy, because then men who have never stepped into the kitchen have strong opinions and what something should taste like, and you're like, okay, we can do without this. But I think that's a pet peeve, and I think that's changing also, because so many men are part of the kitchen now. I think I see that as a trend that's changing. I also like that people are not afraid to cast off that Western lens now, and they're not explaining everything in terms of Western language. At Goya, we chose not to italicize words like dosa or explain dosa as an Indian crepe stuffed with savory potatoes. And I'm like, no, we should own that narrative and we should reclaim it for ourselves, because that's also, I mean, food is political, right?
Yeah.
So being able to do that are small acts of reclaiming your narrative and taking that power back. So I think, I think it's exciting.
And if you had to like go back to Aisha and you when you started, like, you know, if you had to go back to the two of you meeting for the first time and saying, let's do this.
Yeah.
If you had to go back and give yourself a piece of advice, knowing everything that you know now, what would you tell yourself?
I don't know. I feel like every bump in the road has taught us so much. I feel like we had one big fight a year in, and when I look back, it was brutal because we weren't speaking and we were like besties. But if we didn't have that fight, we wouldn't have learned how to communicate or how to handle how to navigate conflict. It taught us the value. It taught us how much we valued each other and how much our relationship meant to each other. And so every conversation from that first year's fight to date, we handle each other with kid gloves and with so much care about, I think I know how she's going to react. This is how I should talk to her about it. And I feel like even the worst things that have happened have always had good things come after. So I don't know if I could pick one. Sorry, that's not a good answer.
No, that is. Yeah. I mean, just like everything, like just live through everything. Everything will teach you something, I guess, right?
Yeah. But definitely the one thing I'm so happy we did was that I said we have to enjoy this time, because we're going to look back and say the days we were broke were the days we had the most fun. So we would consciously try to, savor the moment there.
I was just talking to these guys earlier. I just did a small climb and the whole time I was dying.
Yeah.
But the view outside was beautiful. So I had to keep reminding myself. I was like, just look at where you are. Like, like I know you're dying, but just look at it and try to enjoy it. And I think every spirituality, everything talks about being present and being in the moment. And I think for me, that's what I just strive to do every single day.
Yeah, I hear you. Amen to that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you
for having this conversation with me.
Thanks for inviting me. This was such a pleasure.
I hope you liked that episode. Tell me what you thought about it in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel. For audio episodes, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.